want you to imagine this. If your son or your grandson or brother or nephew headed out to the corner store to buy candy for his brother and never returned because he was shot and killed by someone acting as a police officer who wasn't one. That's exactly what happened to 17-year-old Trayvon Martin of Sanford, Florida on February 26th. Goldie Taylor from the Goldie Taylor Project is here to talk about that with us. And Goldie, Trayvon died. He died face down on the street, unarmed, with Skittles candies in his hand. The neighborhood watch captain, 28-year-old George Zimmerman, who admitted to killing Trayvon, says he felt threatened by the teen. But neighbors who heard the altercation say they're not buying it. Goldie, I want you to listen to part of this report from CNN affiliate WKMG, okay?
I firmly believe this was not self-defense.
Meeting Trayvon Martin's family for the first time, Mary Kutcher and Selma Lamia dropped a bomb during a press conference, saying they witnessed the 17-year-old getting shot, and they were ignored by police.
What we heard, what we saw, that we believe in our hearts 100%, it was not self-defense. I heard the crying. It was a little boy. As soon as the gun went off, the crying stopped.
Sanford police never arrested Zimmerman because they said they had no evidence the shooting was not self-defense. But the witnesses say they tried to call police 4 times to give a statement, and their calls were not returned.
We believe as a gun was pointed at a 17-year-old child, he pled for his life, and George Zimmerman pulled the trigger.
The case has devastated the family, outraged the community, and put the police department under fire. But a grieving mother says for these witnesses, she is grateful.
And just to know that regardless of what happens, there are still good people in this world.
So, Goldie, what's going on here? As of now in this investigation, it appears that Trayvon Martin was not armed. They haven't found a weapon or a gun. All they found was candy.
All they found was candy. I have to tell you, I have a 21 and 28-year-old son. I have never heard them cry as grown men. If I had heard them shriek and beg for their lives like this, it would have been devastating to me. So I can't imagine what Mrs. Martin is going through tonight.
Let's listen to the 911, since you mentioned that crying and screaming. Play it, will you?
Something's wrong with him. Yeah. He's coming to check me out. He's got something in his hands. I don't know what his deal is.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Okay.
All right, that one was the one. That's from George Zimmerman, 28 years old. We're going to talk about that later.
Sure.
The one with Trayvon Martin in it and with the neighbor. The neighbor is saying there's someone outside. I can hear he's screaming, he is crying, and then you hear the gunshots.
Sure.
And you hear, and then after the gunshots, you don't hear any screaming.
Right. You know, George Zimmerman told police that it was his voice on the 911 tape screaming. But I'm a mother.
Yeah.
I know the sound of my own son's cries. Mrs. Martin says it was Trayvon screaming and begging for his life.
The question here is, why hasn't George Zimmerman been arrested? Why are police and whoever's in, I think they said it's in the hands of the state's attorney now, why he hasn't been arrested? And the investigation, as we know, has to play out. But it appears there's no movement on this. And on social media, people are going crazy about the story. Justice for Trayvon.
I would say that if not for what has happened in social media, specifically among Twitter and some of the leading journalists and key influencers there, that this would have ended. Because, this police chief said it was self-defense and had closed the case. And so the idea that the state's attorney now has this, the Justice Department is now looking into this case on civil rights charges and other things. I think that came because of the public backlash.
Well, according to the family believes that the police department and those who are investigating it are trying not to talk about it. This is according to the family. And the police department hasn't responded to this.
The police chief specifically is blaming Trayvon.
Well, they're saying they believe that they're not commenting on it because they're expecting this to play out in the media, and the media will move on to a different story, and then they won't have to deal with it. That's according to the family. But that's not going to happen with this story. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this incident after the break. Specifically, who is George Zimmerman, and why was he carrying a gun? And did a Florida law, it is known as stand your ground, did it embolden him? Now, Now we want to focus on the man who admittedly killed the Florida teenager, Trayvon Martin. He said he did it in self-defense. And remember, the 17-year-old was gunned down as he headed home after buying candy for his little brother. The neighborhood watch captain, his name is George Zimmerman, told 911 he thought Trayvon was acting suspiciously. You heard the 911 part of it, at least, earlier. And against the urging of the dispatcher, he followed and confronted him. There was a gunshot, and then Trayvon was killed. Now, I want you to listen to what the official rules of the neighborhood watch says about carrying a gun. This is according to one of the neighbors.
George Zimmerman wants to say that he has a concealed weapon for personal protection. That day, he was acting as armed security. The official manual of the Neighborhood Watch Program, which we will give you all a copy of, issued by the U.S. Department of Justice, specifically states that members do not possess police power, and they shall not carry weapons.
All right, so we want to continue this important discussion with Goldie Taylor now of the Goldie Taylor Project. George Zimmerman should not have been armed, and the 911 dispatcher told him not to get involved. And then he also said, as he said, you know, he looks suspicious, he's on drugs, something's going on with him. And then he says, these a-holes always get away with it. That was in the 911 as well.
It is worth noting that George Zimmerman, since January 1st of this year, has called 911 46 times. I
think it was 2011.
In any jurisdiction, even 46 times in a year, 2 years, make that 5 years. That person would have been named a nuisance caller. He was told specifically not to follow Trayvon. Not only did he do that, but he parked, got out of his car, armed, and confronted him. I don't know that this is a black and white issue so much as it is a human rights issue, but I will tell you this. Victims are the race and economic status of the victim is the #1 predictor of investigation and conviction. The fact that Trayvon Martin is black is relevant here.
How does someone look suspicious?
I guess Skittles is a suspicious thing.
No, I'm serious. How does it someone, is it what you're wearing? Is it you're making a threatening move? Because according to this, it is called Stand Your Ground law, which is on the books in Florida, and it's on the books in more than a handful. I think it's like 13 or 14 other states in the union.
But Stand Your Ground doesn't apply here. Stand Your Ground means
if
that
you're breaking and entering.
No. You have to believe. It's more than that. You have to believe that you or someone here is in imminent danger of not being hurt, of being killed. And then you do not have to flee. You have no duty to flee. If you or someone else isn't, you must believe that someone's going to be killed right away.
But did this law embolden, you believe, George Zimmerman and others like him? Because there have been other incidents where people said this contributed to the shooting or the killing or what have you, or to this sort of incident. I
think there have been reports that George Zimmerman had been more and more emboldened over time. There had been a series of break-ins. He had helped police solve, several break-ins in the neighborhood, and so he had been emboldened over a course of time. This is someone who's taken criminal justice classes, who was pursuing a role in law enforcement.
He was a volunteer.
He was a volunteer armed with a 9mm who accosted a 17-year-old black boy who was no more than 15 pounds heavier than me and said his life was in danger.
I know that you're going down to Florida to interview people and to talk to them at a rally and do an episode of Goldie Taylor Project. We look forward to that. Thank you, Goldie. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
When most of